The warning sirens had been screaming across Veloria Prime for 3 days straight. In the capital city's underground bunkers, millions of Velorians huddled together, their crystalline skin dimming with fear as they felt the vibrations of orbital bombardments shake the ground above them. Children clung to their parents, asking questions that no one could answer. When would it stop? Would they be safe? Would anyone come to help them? Commander Zelthar knew the answers to those questions, and they terrified him. The bombardments would continue until the Krell Dominion decided to land their ground forces. They would not be safe, and no one was coming to help. He stood in the High Council's emergency command center, a vast chamber carved deep beneath the planet's surface. The walls displayed holographic projections of the space battle happening in orbit above them. It was not really a battle anymore. It was a massacre. The last of the Velorian defense fleet, 12 cruisers that had been the pride of their peaceful civilization, were being systematically destroyed by the Krell Armada. As Zelthar watched, another blue marker winked out of existence on the display. That was the Starlight commanded by his friend Captain Morvax. 300 souls gone in an instant. "How many ships do they have now?" Counselor Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was old, even by Velorian standards, and had served on the High Council for 60 years. In all that time she had worked for peace, for understanding, for building bridges between civilizations. Now she stood watching those bridges burn. "Our sensors count 417 Krell warships in orbit," the tactical officer reported. His name was Lieutenant Vornax, and he was young, barely into his second decade. He should have been studying at the Science Academy, preparing for a future among the stars. Instead, he was watching his world die. "They are positioning their dreadnoughts for surface bombardment. Our shields will not hold against that kind of firepower." Zelthar felt the weight of every decision that had brought them to this moment. The Velorians had always been a peaceful species. They explored the cosmos to learn, not to conquer. They built beautiful cities of crystal and light, advanced their understanding of science and art, and welcomed other species with open arms and genuine curiosity. They had no enemies, or so they had thought. The Krell Dominion had changed everything. 3 months ago, they had appeared at the edges of the Andara sector without warning. Their demands were simple: submit or be destroyed. Pay tribute in resources and labor, allow Krell overseers to govern every aspect of Velorian society, or face annihilation. The High Council had refused, of course. They were not slaves. They would not bend their knees to tyrants. They had immediately sent messages to the Galactic Council, expecting the community of civilized species to stand against this aggression. They had been so naive. The Galactic Council had debated for weeks. Some species expressed sympathy. Others offered prayers and best wishes. But none offered military support. The Krell were too powerful, they said. Intervening would only spread the conflict. Perhaps if the Velorians negotiated, found some middle ground, tragedy could be avoided. There was no middle ground with the Krell. When the Velorians refused again, the Krell responded with violence. They destroyed the agricultural colony on Veloria 2, killing 3 million civilians in a single day. They had bombarded the mining outpost on Veloria 4 until nothing remained but rubble and radiation. And now they had come for Veloria Prime, the homeworld, the heart of their civilization. "We have exhausted every option," Counselor Thrain said. He was a military advisor, one of the few Velorians who had studied warfare and strategic defense. Even he looked defeated now. The neighboring systems refused to help. The Xandran Empire says they cannot risk war with the Krell. The Porthan Collective has closed their borders entirely. The Galactic Council continues to debate while we die. "There must be someone," Maria insisted. Her bioluminescent skin flickered with barely controlled emotion. "In all the vast galaxy, there must be one species willing to stand against this evil." Zelthar thought back over the past weeks, reviewing every diplomatic contact, every potential ally. They had called everyone. The Orion Federation had expressed regret, but claimed their fleet was needed for internal security. The Silicon Consensus had simply not responded at all. The Aquarian Alliance had sent a message of condolence, as if the Velorians were already dead. Then he remembered something. A conversation from long ago, before he had even joined the military. He had been a student, attending the first Galactic Assembly with his mentor. It had been 70 years ago, a gathering of hundreds of species to discuss trade, science, and mutual cooperation. There had been a human delegation there. Zelthar remembered them clearly because they had been so different from the other species. While most delegates wore elaborate ceremonial robes or displayed their natural magnificence, the humans had worn simple uniforms. They had been quiet, listening more than speaking, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. When it had been their turn to address the assembly, their representative had stood and made a simple offer. Humanity was new to galactic society, they said, but they understood the dangers of the cosmos. They offered friendship and protection to any species that needed it. They would share their technology, their resources, and if necessary, their military strength to defend the innocent. Zelthar remembered the laughter that had followed, the contempt. Species that had been traveling the stars for millennia had mocked these newcomers. Humans were primitive, they said, barely beyond their own solar system. What could they possibly offer to ancient civilizations? Their military, laughable. Their technology, centuries behind the established powers. The human representative had smiled politely through it all. A woman, if Zelthar remembered correctly. She had short, dark hair and calm eyes that seemed to see more than most people realized. When the laughter died down, she had simply nodded and said that the offer would remain open regardless. Any species that called for help would find humanity ready to answer. Then they had left communication protocols with the Galactic Archive and returned to their territory in the frontier regions. Most species had dismissed them entirely. Humans had become a joke, a cautionary tale about species that reached for the stars before they were ready. But they had left those protocols. Those communication frequencies that anyone could use to call for help. The humans, Zelthar said suddenly. Every head in the command center turned toward him. 70 years ago, at the first Galactic Assembly, the humans offered protection to any species that needed it. They left emergency communication frequencies in the Galactic Archive. Counselor Thrain frowned. The humans, those primitives from the frontier, I remember the stories. The Galactic Council mocked them mercilessly. They were considered barely civilized. They were considered weak, Maria said slowly, her expression thoughtful. But what if we were wrong? What if everyone was wrong? It has been 70 years, another counselor objected. Even if their offer was genuine, would they still honor it? Would they even still exist? Frontier territories are dangerous. Any number of disasters could have befallen them. Zelthar moved to a console and began searching the Galactic Archive. The emergency protocols were still there, filed under obsolete diplomatic contacts. The frequency was clearly marked for emergency military assistance. There was even a simple message attached, repeating the original offer in dozens of languages. We have called everyone else, Zelthar said, looking around at the council. We have begged for help from civilizations that claim to value justice and peace. They have all refused. What do we have to lose by trying one more frequency? The ground shook again as another Krell bombardment struck the shields above the city. The holographic display showed 3 more Velorian ships destroyed. They were down to 7 vessels now, and those were falling back toward the planet in a desperate attempt to provide some protection to the population centers. Maria made her decision. Send the message. Use the human protocols. If they do not answer, we are no worse off than we are now. Zelthar's hands moved across the controls, activating the ancient frequency. He composed a simple message, knowing that if humanity still existed, they might not even remember the Velorians. He explained who they were, what was happening, and made a simple request for military assistance against an overwhelming enemy force. As he prepared to send the message, he hesitated. What if the humans did come? What if they were still as primitive as everyone believed? They might arrive only to be destroyed alongside the Velorians. He would be sending another species to their deaths. But then he looked at the display again. 2 more Velorian ships gone. The Krell were preparing their landing forces. In a matter of hours, armored warriors would be rampaging through Velorian cities, killing anyone who resisted and enslaving those who surrendered. Velorian civilization, thousands of years of art and science and culture would be erased from existence. He sent the message. For long minutes, nothing happened. The command center was silent except for the constant stream of reports from the dying defense fleet. Zelthar had expected nothing different. The frequency was 70 years old. Even if humanity remembered their promise, even if they still existed, how could they possibly respond in time? Then his console lit up with an incoming transmission. The authentication codes matched the human protocols perfectly. "We have a response," he said, his voice shaking. "It is coming from the edge of the system. A human vessel." The entire command center held its breath as Zelthar opened the transmission. A human face appeared on the main display. It was a woman with short brown hair pulled back in a military style. She wore a dark blue uniform with insignia that Zelthar did not recognize. Her expression was calm and professional. "This is Captain Laura Hayes of the United Nations Space Fleet vessel Defiance. We have received your distress call and are responding under Protocol Shepard. Please transmit your current tactical situation and defensive capabilities. Additional forces are being mobilized and will arrive shortly. You are no longer alone. Humanity remembers its promises." The message was brief and professional, but those last words echoed through the command center like thunder. "You are no longer alone. Humanity remembers its promises." "One ship," Counselor Thrain said, his hope deflating. They sent one ship against a Krell armada, but Zelthar was watching the sensors, and what he saw made his heart beat faster. The human vessel had appeared at the system's edge, but it was not alone. 2 more ships had just emerged from faster-than-light travel, then 5 more, then a dozen. "They are still coming," Lieutenant Vornax reported, his young voice filled with wonder. "I am reading multiple faster-than-light signatures. The humans are arriving in force." On the display, blue markers began appearing alongside the red Krell fleet and the fading green markers of the Valorian defense. 20 human ships, 30, 50. They kept coming, emerging from FTL at precise intervals and moving into formation with practiced efficiency. Zelthar transmitted all their tactical data to the human fleet, including the positions of the Krell ships, the status of their own forces, and the location of population centers that needed protection. The response came back within seconds. "Received and understood. All Valorian vessels are ordered to fall back to defensive positions around the planet. Human forces will engage the Krell fleet. Medical ships will be arriving shortly to assist with casualties. Captain Hayes sends her compliments to the Valorian Defense Fleet for their courage in holding out this long." The Valorian ships began their retreat immediately, grateful for any reprieve. The 7 remaining cruisers had been fighting non-stop for 3 days, their crews exhausted and their systems failing. As they pulled back toward the planet, the human fleet advanced to meet the Krell. Counselor Muria was watching the sensor display with growing amazement. "How many ships do they have?" "I count 147 human vessels," Vornax reported. "And more are still arriving. They have everything: battleships, carriers, destroyers, frigates, and support vessels. This is not a rescue force. This is a full military fleet." Zelthar was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. 70 years ago, humans had been dismissed as primitive. Their technology was supposed to be crude. Their military was supposed to be a joke. Yet here they were, fielding a fleet that rivaled anything the major powers could assemble, and they were doing it in response to a distress call from a species most of them had probably never even heard of. The Krell had noticed the new arrivals as well. Their fleet began repositioning, turning to face this unexpected threat. Zelthar could imagine the confusion among the Krell commanders. They had come expecting to crush a peaceful civilization with minimal resistance. Now they faced an unknown fleet of considerable size. A transmission came through on all frequencies. It was directed at the Krell fleet, but the humans had copied it to the Valorians as well. Captain Hayes' face appeared again, but this time her expression was harder, her voice carrying unmistakable authority. "Attention, Krell forces. This is Captain Laura Hayes of the United Nations Space Fleet. You are hereby ordered to cease all hostile actions against the Valorian people immediately. Withdraw your forces from this system within the next 2 hours or face the consequences. This is your only warning." Zelthar had never heard anyone speak to the Krell like that. The Dominion was feared across the galaxy. They had conquered 17 systems. Their military reputation was built on overwhelming force and absolute ruthlessness. Species negotiated with them out of terror, not respect. The Krell response was predictable. The War Master commanding their fleet opened a channel, his reptilian features twisted with contempt. "Pathetic humans, we have heard of your species. You are weak. You are soft. You offer friendship to those who deserve conquest. Withdraw now, or we will destroy you along with these Valorian fools." Captain Hayes' expression did not change. "I gave you a chance to leave peacefully. Remember that in the hours to come." She closed the channel and turned her attention back to her fleet. Zelthar watched as the human ships moved into attack formation. They were organized into distinct battle groups, each with a mix of different vessel types. The formations were complex, suggesting sophisticated tactical doctrine and extensive training. The Krell War Master was not impressed. He had 417 warships under his command, including massive dreadnoughts that had reduced planets to ash. These humans had sent a fleet of smaller vessels, impressive in number perhaps, but clearly inferior in individual firepower. It would be a slaughter. He ordered his vanguard fleet forward. 40 heavy cruisers, each one a ship of the line capable of destroying most opponents through sheer firepower. They would sweep away these presumptuous humans and then finish what they had started with the Valorians. The human fleet did not retreat. Instead, they accelerated to meet the Krell vanguard. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations, though the actual engagement lasted less than 18 minutes. The human ships opened fire first, but not with energy weapons as the Krell expected. Instead, they fired projectiles. Solid metal slugs accelerated to incredible velocities by magnetic rails. The Krell shields, designed to disperse energy weapons, were useless against kinetic impacts. The first salvo tore through 3 Krell cruisers like paper. The tungsten projectiles, moving at a significant fraction of light speed, carried so much kinetic energy that they didn't just penetrate the hulls. They vaporized everything they touched, creating massive explosions as the metal turned to plasma inside the enemy ships. The Krell vanguard responded with their own weapons, unleashing torrents of particle beams and plasma cannons. But the human ships were moving in ways that seemed impossible. They changed direction with impossible speed, their inertial dampening systems far more advanced than anything the Krell possessed. Shots that should have connected missed by meters as the human vessels danced through space. And then the human ships began using their energy weapons as well. Focused particle beams that cut through Krell armor like a cutting torch through ice. Missiles that maneuvered independently, each one guided by its own artificial intelligence that could think and react faster than any organic mind. One human battleship, designated in their communications as the Valiant, performed a maneuver that seemed suicidal. It charged directly at 3 Krell cruisers, drawing their concentrated fire. Just as the enemy weapons reached it, the battleship's shields flared with strange harmonics and something impossible happened. The Krell weapons bounced off, reflected back at their own ships. While the Krell vessels staggered under their own firepower, the Valiant's rail cannons spoke, and all 3 cruisers ceased to exist. Another group of human ships simply vanished from sensors. They had been there one moment, and then they were gone. The Krell searched frantically, but their detection systems found nothing. Then explosions began rippling through their formation as invisible attackers struck critical systems with surgical precision. Engines exploded. Weapons banks went dark. Command centers were breached by precise targeting that suggested the attackers could see through the Krell hulls. Zelthar realized he was watching stealth technology that was decades ahead of anything the Galactic Council possessed. Those human ships had not disappeared. They had simply become invisible to every sensor the Krell possessed. But the truly devastating blow came from the largest human vessel in the fleet. It was designated the Independence, a massive ship that dwarfed even the Krell heavy cruisers. For most of the battle, it had held back, seemingly content to coordinate the fleet's actions. Now it advanced, and when it fired its main weapons, Zelthar understood why the other ships had cleared a path. The particle beams that emerged from the Independence were not like anything else in the battle. They were coherent streams of such intense energy that they appeared as solid bars of blue-white light. When they touched the Krell flagship, the enemy vessel did not explode. It simply evaporated, transformed from a mighty warship into expanding clouds of ionized gas in less than a second. The remaining Krell ships in the vanguard broke and ran. Of the 40 cruisers that had advanced so confidently, 37 were destroyed. 3 survivors fled back toward the main Krell fleet, broadcasting frantic warnings about the humans' capabilities. In the Valorian command center, there was absolute silence. They had watched the impossible, a force that had terrorized their civilization, that had destroyed their colonies and murdered millions of their people, had been annihilated in minutes by these humans that everyone had dismissed as primitive. How? Counselor Thrain whispered. How is this possible? Zelthar had no answer. None of them did. But as he watched more human ships continue to arrive, as he saw them take up defensive positions around Veloria Prime, he began to understand something important. 70 years ago, humanity had come to the Galactic Assembly offering friendship and protection. They had been mocked and dismissed, but they had not argued. They had not insisted on respect. They had simply smiled, left their communication protocols, and gone home. And then they had spent 70 years preparing for the day when someone would actually call for help. They had built this fleet. They had developed these weapons. They had trained their crews to perfection, not for conquest, not for glory, but so that when a desperate species called out in the darkness, humanity would be ready to answer. The Krell War Master was watching the destruction of his vanguard with something he had rarely felt before: fear. These humans were not the primitive species the Dominion's intelligence had described. They were something far more dangerous. They were warriors who had chosen peace but had never forgotten how to fight. He opened a communication channel to the Krell High Command, requesting immediate reinforcements and strategic guidance. The response came within the hour. The High Command ordered him to crush these humans and make an example of them. The Dominion could not afford to appear weak. If one species successfully defied them, others might find courage to resist. The War Master began marshaling his main fleet. 377 warships, including his personal flagship, the massive dreadnought Devastator. He would show these humans what true power looked like. But as he gave the orders, he noticed something on his sensors. More human ships were arriving, many more, and leading them was a vessel even larger than the Independence. The new arrivals were broadcasting their identification. The 5th Fleet of the United Nations Space Command had arrived, led by Admiral Frank Bishop aboard the super dreadnought Resolution. The War Master felt his confidence waver. How many ships did these humans have? How had they hidden this capability from galactic knowledge for 70 years? He would find out soon enough. The battle for Veloria Prime was only beginning. Admiral Frank Bishop had been in his quarters aboard the Resolution when the emergency protocols activated. He had been reviewing tactical reports from the frontier territories, a routine part of his daily duties as commander of the 5th Fleet. Then his communication console had lit up with a frequency he had seen in simulations, but never in actual use. Someone had finally called for help. Frank had been a young officer 70 years ago when humanity had made its offer to the Galactic Assembly. He remembered the laughter, the contempt, the dismissive attitudes of species that considered themselves superior. He also remembered the quiet determination of the human delegation when they returned home. They had not been discouraged. They had been motivated. Humanity had spent the next 7 decades building the most capable military force in the galaxy. Not because they wanted to conquer, not because they sought dominance, but because they had made a promise and humans kept their promises. Now, as the Resolution emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valorian system, Frank could see the situation clearly. The Krell fleet was massive, but Captain Hayes had already proven that size was not everything. Her engagement with the Krell Vanguard had been textbook perfect. Overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. Minimal human casualties, maximum enemy losses, but the main Krell fleet was a different challenge. 377 warships, many of them heavy capital ships with enough firepower to crack planets. The War Master commanding them was clearly preparing for an all-out assault. This would not be quick or easy. "Communications, open a channel to all Krell vessels," Frank ordered. His bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, and within seconds he was broadcasting on all frequencies. "War Master Cruven, this is Admiral Frank Bishop of the United Nations Space Command. You have one final opportunity to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave this sector. There need be no more bloodshed today." The response came quickly. The Krell War Master appeared on the main display, his reptilian features twisted with rage and contempt. Behind him, Frank could see the bridge of the Devastator, a massive command center filled with combat stations and tactical displays. "You dare offer me terms, human? I command the might of the Krell Dominion. We have conquered 17 systems. We have crushed civilizations far older and more advanced than yours. You will die here, and your pathetic species will learn what happens to those who defy us." Frank had expected this response. The Krell had built their empire on intimidation and overwhelming force. They had never faced an opponent who could match them ship for ship. They certainly had never faced humanity. "I gave you a chance," Frank said calmly. "What happens next is on you." He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer, Commander Stephen Price. "All ships are to engage as planned. Authorization code Bishop Alpha 7. Execute Operation Hammer." Throughout the human fleet, captains received their orders and began moving into position. The Fifth Fleet had trained for this exact scenario hundreds of times. Every ship knew its role. Every crew knew their duties. They had practiced coordination until it was second nature. The Krell fleet advanced in a massive wall formation, a brutal but effective tactic that concentrated their firepower. It was a formation designed to overwhelm through sheer force. Against most opponents, it worked perfectly. Humanity was not most opponents. The human fleet split into multiple battle groups, each one commanded by an experienced captain with complete tactical autonomy. Captain Laura Hayes took her group to engage the Krell left flank. Captain Nicole Grant aboard the Independence moved to the right. Captain Richard Stone and the Valiant took the center, directly opposite the War Master's flagship. But there were other elements in play that the Krell could not see. The Ghost Squadron, commanded by Captain Helen Price, had already vanished from sensors. Their stealth destroyers were moving through the Krell formation like invisible predators, targeting critical systems and preparing to strike at the perfect moment. And in the rear, safely positioned but ready to respond, the medical frigate Mercy under Dr. Helen Rodriguez waited to rescue the wounded from both sides. Frank had given explicit orders that any Krell who surrendered would be treated with the same care as human casualties. Some of his officers had questioned this decision, but Frank had been firm. Humanity fought to protect the innocent, not to commit atrocities. The Krell opened fire first, unleashing a devastating barrage of energy weapons and missiles. The volume of fire was incredible, enough to annihilate most fleets. But the human ships scattered like a flock of birds, their movements coordinated by advanced tactical AI that could process battlefield data in microseconds. The human return fire was selective and precise. Rail cannons spoke, hurling tungsten projectiles at relativistic speeds. Particle beams carved through Krell armor. Smart missiles twisted and turned through space, each one guided by its own targeting computer that could adapt to enemy countermeasures. Captain Richard Stone had earned his reputation through years of combat experience in the frontier territories. He had fought pirates, dealt with rogue AI ships, and defended human colonies from every threat imaginable. Now he brought all that experience to bear against the Krell flagship. The Valiant accelerated directly at the Devastator, drawing fire from a dozen Krell warships. Stone's helmsman, Lieutenant Kevin Martinez, flew the massive battleship like a fighter craft, threading between enemy fire with impossible precision. Every time a Krell weapon locked onto them, the ship was already somewhere else. "Now," Stone ordered calmly. His weapons officer, Commander Patricia Lane, had been waiting for this moment. She fired the Valiant's experimental shield system, and the entire ship was enveloped in a shimmering energy field. When the Krell weapons struck it, something extraordinary happened. The energy was not absorbed or dispersed. It was reflected, bounced back at the ships that had fired it. 3 Krell cruisers staggered as their own weapons tore into them. While they recovered from the shock, the Valiant's main guns fired. The rail cannons hit with such force that the first cruiser simply broke apart, its structural integrity shattered by the kinetic impact. The second lost its entire forward section. The third tried to turn away, but a follow-up shot caught it in the engine core, and it exploded in a brilliant flash. Captain Nicole Grant was coordinating a different kind of attack. The Independence was not just a warship. It was a fleet command vessel, equipped with the most advanced tactical systems humanity had ever developed. From her position, she could see the entire battlefield and coordinate the actions of dozens of ships simultaneously. Battle Group 7, the enemy cruisers at heading 270 are exposed. Hit them now, she ordered. Immediately, 6 human destroyers broke formation and struck at the vulnerable Krell ships, destroying them before they could respond. Battle Group 3, enemy reinforcements are moving to flank Captain Hayes. Intercept and engage. Another group of human ships moved to counter the threat, ensuring that Hayes could continue her assault without distraction. Nicole was not just commanding ships. She was orchestrating a symphony of destruction, each element of her fleet playing its part perfectly. The Krell fought with brute force. Humanity fought with intelligence, coordination, and technology that was generations ahead of their opponents. The Ghost Squadron chose this moment to reveal themselves. Captain Helen Price had positioned her stealth destroyers throughout the Krell formation, invisible and waiting. Now they all fired simultaneously, targeting the most critical systems on the largest ships. Engine cores exploded. Weapons batteries went offline. Command centers were breached. The Krell formation, so solid and intimidating moments before, began to fragment as ships lost power or control. And before they could recover, the visible human ships poured fire into the gaps, exploiting every weakness the Ghost Squadron had created. War Master Cruven watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. He had fought dozens of battles. He had conquered worlds. But he had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought with a combination of advanced technology, tactical brilliance, and perfect coordination that made his own forces look primitive by comparison. All ships, concentrate fire on the largest human vessel, he ordered, pointing at the Independence. Destroy their command ship and the rest will fall into disarray. It was sound logic. Most species relied heavily on centralized command. Kill the flagship and the fleet would struggle to coordinate. Dozens of Krell ships turned their weapons toward the Independence, preparing to unleash everything they had. Nicole Grant saw it coming. Her tactical displays showed the enemy ships realigning, saw the energy signatures building as they prepared to fire. She could have ordered the Independence to retreat to seek safety while other ships covered her withdrawal. Instead, she smiled. All power to forward shields. Weapons, prepare the mass driver. Let us show them what the Independence was built for. The mass driver was humanity's most devastating weapon. It was a massive magnetic accelerator that ran the entire length of the Independence, capable of hurling a solid tungsten rod at speeds that approached a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy was beyond anything conventional weapons could achieve. The Krell fleet fired. Hundreds of particle beams and plasma cannons converged on the Independence, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ship's shields flared brilliant white as they absorbed the tremendous energy. Alarms blared across the bridge as the shield generators screamed under the load. But the shields held. Human defensive technology, refined over 70 years of preparation, proved equal to the challenge. And while the Krell were concentrated on their attack, the Independence fired back. The mass driver spoke with a sound that resonated through the entire ship. The tungsten rod, weighing several tons and moving at 40% of light speed, crossed the distance to the Devastator in a fraction of a second. When it struck, the kinetic energy was so immense that the laws of physics became weapons of mass destruction. The rod did not just penetrate the Devastator's armor. It turned the entire ship into plasma. The massive dreadnought, pride of the Krell fleet and symbol of their military might, ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a mighty warship. The next moment there was only an expanding sphere of superheated gas and debris. The shockwave from the explosion damaged several nearby Krell ships, but more devastating than the physical damage was the psychological impact. The Krell had just watched their war master and his entire command staff vaporized in an instant. Their flagship, thought to be invulnerable, had been erased from existence by a single shot. The Krell fleet began to break apart. Some ships tried to continue fighting, but without central command, their coordination fell apart. Others attempted to retreat, only to find human ships blocking their escape routes. Still others, seeing the futility of continued resistance, simply stopped fighting and broadcast surrender signals. Admiral Bishop gave the order he had been preparing for. All ships cease fire on any Krell vessel broadcasting surrender. Accept their capitulation and direct them to the designated containment area. Medical teams begin search and rescue operations for escape pods and damaged vessels. That includes Krell survivors. Captain Hayes had taken some damage during the fighting. The Defiance had been hit by several Krell weapons, and while her shields had held, some systems needed repair. But she had accomplished her mission. The Krell left flank had been shattered, and her battle group had suffered minimal casualties. She watched as Krell ships began surrendering across the battlefield. Some of her crew were celebrating, but Laura felt only relief. The battle was won, but at what cost? She checked the casualty reports. 12 human ships had taken significant damage. 3 had been destroyed. Out of a fleet of over 200 vessels, those losses were remarkably light, but each destroyed ship meant dozens of crew members who would not be going home. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Valorian surface," her communications officer reported. "Counselor Murray is requesting permission to speak with you." Laura took a moment to straighten her uniform before accepting the call. The elderly Valorian appeared on her screen, her bioluminescent skin flickering with emotion that the translator could barely convey. "Captain Hayes, I do not have words sufficient to express our gratitude. You came when no one else would. You fought for us when the entire galaxy abandoned us. How can we ever repay this debt?" Laura shook her head gently. "There is no debt, Counselor. 70 years ago, humanity made a promise. We said that any civilization that called for help would find us ready to answer. You called and we answered, that is all." "But why?" Maria asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Why would you risk your lives for strangers? Why would you stand against the Krell when even the great powers of the Galactic Council refused?" Laura was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Because we know what it feels like to be alone and afraid. Because we remember times in our own history when we needed help and no one came. Because we decided, as a species, that we would never let that happen to others if we had the power to prevent it." She paused, then continued. "And because the right thing to do is not always the easy thing to do. The Galactic Council chose safety over justice. They chose to protect themselves rather than defend the innocent. Humanity chose differently." Admiral Bishop was conducting similar conversations with other Valorian officials. He had beamed down to Valoria Prime with a security detail, standing in the High Council chambers as the Valorian leaders expressed their overwhelming gratitude. Commander Zelthar was there, looking exhausted but relieved. His defense fleet had held out for 3 days against impossible odds, buying time for his people to evacuate the cities and prepare the shelters. Now he stood before the human admiral, a warrior recognizing another warrior. "Your fleet is extraordinary," Zelthar said. "Your technology, your tactics, your coordination. The Galactic Council said humans were primitive. They said your military was a joke. How did they get it so wrong?" Frank smiled slightly. "They saw what they wanted to see. We were new to galactic society, so they assumed we were inferior. We offered friendship, so they assumed we were weak. They did not bother to look deeper or ask questions. They just made assumptions based on their own prejudices." "But you let them believe those things," Counselor Thrain observed. "You could have demonstrated your capabilities. You could have demanded respect." "We could have," Frank agreed. But that would have made us a threat. The Galactic Council would have seen us as potential enemies rather than potential friends. So we kept quiet, stayed in our own territory, and prepared. We knew that someday someone would call for help, and when they did, we wanted to be ready. 70 years, Maria said softly. You prepared for 70 years, built this incredible fleet, trained these amazing crews, all for the possibility that someone might call for help. The dedication that required, the patience, the commitment to a promise that most species had forgotten. Humanity has a long memory, Frank said, and we value our promises. When we say we will do something, we do it. When we offer friendship, we mean it. When we promise protection, we deliver it. The conversation was interrupted by urgent reports from the fleet. Krell ships throughout the system were surrendering, but there were complications. Many Krell warriors would rather die than submit to what they saw as inferior species. Some ships were fighting to the last, forcing the human fleet to destroy them. Others were attempting to escape to faster than light, hoping to reach Krell space and report what had happened. Frank excused himself and returned to the resolution. From his command chair, he could see the cleanup operation in progress. Human medical teams were working alongside Valorian doctors to treat the wounded. Damaged ships from both sides were being towed to safe locations. Krell prisoners were being processed and secured. Admiral, we have a situation, Commander Price reported. A group of Krell ships is attempting to break through our containment and escape. They are ignoring all surrender demands and firing on any ship that tries to stop them. Frank considered the situation. He could let them go, allow them to return to Krell space and report the defeat. But that would mean more war, more bloodshed as the Krell Dominion sought revenge. Or he could destroy them, but that meant killing Krell who were simply trying to survive and return home. Open a channel to those ships, he ordered. Let me speak to their commanders. When the channel opened, Frank found himself facing several Krell officers, their expressions a mixture of defiance and desperation. He recognized the look. These were professional soldiers who had been beaten and were struggling to accept it. I understand your desire to return home, Frank said calmly. You have fought bravely, even if your cause was unjust. I am prepared to allow you to leave, but under certain conditions. You will submit to inspection to ensure you carry no weapons of mass destruction. You will accept navigational beacons that will allow us to track your journey home, and you will carry a message from me to your high command. The ranking Krell officer, a ship captain named Vortak, snarled in response. The Dominion does not accept terms from defeated enemies. You are the defeated enemy, Frank pointed out gently. Your fleet is scattered. Your war master is dead. Your mission has failed completely. You can accept my terms and live to see your homeworld again, or you can die here in a pointless final stand. Choose. There was a long silence as the Krell officers conferred among themselves. Finally, Vortak spoke again. What message would you have us carry? Tell your high command that the age of Krell expansion is over. Any future aggression against peaceful civilizations will be met with the same response you received here. Humanity will not tolerate tyrants who prey on the weak. If the Dominion wants war with us, we will give them war. But if they want peace, we are willing to negotiate a lasting settlement that respects the sovereignty of all species. And if the High Command rejects your terms, Frank's expression hardened, then we will bring the war to them. We will liberate every system they have conquered. We will dismantle their empire piece by piece, and we will ensure they never threaten another innocent civilization again. The Krell could see he meant every word. This was not bluster or empty threats. The humans had just destroyed the largest Krell fleet ever assembled with minimal losses. If they decided to go on the offensive, the Dominion would face a war it could not win. We accept your terms, Vortak said finally. We will carry your message. Over the next several days, the human fleet worked alongside Valorian forces to restore order to the system. The Krell prisoners were treated fairly, given medical care and adequate living conditions. Many of them were confused by this treatment. The Dominion taught that mercy was weakness, that defeated enemies should be enslaved or killed. But the humans treated them as prisoners of war deserving of basic dignity. Some Krell prisoners began talking to their human guards, asking questions about Earth and human civilization. They learned about humanity's own history, about the wars and conflicts that had nearly destroyed the species. They heard about how humans had learned from their mistakes, how they had built a society based on cooperation rather than domination. One Krell warrior, a veteran of many campaigns, spoke with Dr. Rodriguez while being treated for injuries. "Your people are strange," he said through a translator. "You have the power to conquer, but you choose to protect. You could enslave us, but you treat us with kindness." "Why?" Helen finished bandaging his wounds before answering. "Because we have been where you are. In our past, we had empires that conquered and enslaved. We had wars that killed millions. We learned that violence and domination only lead to more suffering, so we chose a different path. But the strong should rule," the Krell insisted. "That is the natural order. The strong should protect," Helen corrected gently. "Strength without compassion is just brutality. Power without purpose is just destruction. Humanity learned to combine our strength with our compassion, our power with our principles. That is what makes us truly strong." The news of the Battle of Veloria Prime spread across the galaxy with incredible speed. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive were suddenly reevaluating everything they thought they knew. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to discuss the implications. Some species were grateful. Civilizations that had suffered under Krell aggression saw hope for the first time in years. If humanity could defeat the Dominion, perhaps the age of conquest was truly ending. Others were fearful. If humans had been hiding this level of military capability, what else were they hiding? Could they be trusted? Might they become conquerors themselves? Admiral Bishop addressed these concerns in a transmission to the Galactic Council. He stood before the assembled representatives, the same chamber where humanity had been mocked 70 years earlier, and spoke with quiet authority. "We understand your concerns. You are afraid of what humanity might do with our military power. Some of you suspect we might follow the same path as the Krell, using our strength to build an empire. Let me be absolutely clear about humanity's intentions." He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. "We will never seek to conquer or dominate other species. We will never demand tribute or submission. We will never use our military might for anything except the defense of innocent civilizations against aggression. This is not just a promise. It is a fundamental principle of human society, enshrined in our laws and our culture. But we will also not stand idle while tyrants prey on the weak. Any species that calls for our help will receive it, regardless of whether the Galactic Council approves. We will not ask permission to defend the innocent. We will not debate while people die. We will act swiftly and decisively to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The choice facing this council is simple. You can work with humanity to build a galaxy where all species can live in peace and security. Or you can oppose us and discover that we are far more formidable than you ever imagined. We prefer cooperation, but we are prepared for either outcome." The speech created exactly the response Frank had intended. Some council members were outraged at what they saw as human arrogance. Others were thoughtful, recognizing the truth in his words. Still others were pragmatic, understanding that opposing humanity would be both foolish and futile. Back on Veloria Prime, life was slowly returning to normal. The Krell bombardment had caused damage, but nothing that could not be repaired. More importantly, the Velorian people had hope again. They had faced extinction and survived, not through their own strength alone, but because someone had answered their call for help. Commander Zelthar stood with Captain Hayes on a balcony overlooking the capital city. The sun was setting, painting the crystalline buildings in shades of gold and orange. Below them, Velorians were emerging from the shelters, beginning the work of rebuilding and recovering. "What happens now?" Zelthar asked. "Will your fleet stay to protect us if the Krell return?" Laura nodded. "A battle group will remain here for the next several months until we are certain the Krell understand that Veloria is under human protection. After that, we will maintain regular patrols through this sector. You will not face this threat alone again." "And what do you want in return? What price does humanity demand for this protection?" Laura smiled. "The same thing we wanted 70 years ago: friendship, cooperation. A galaxy where different species work together instead of preying on each other. If Veloria wants to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth, we would welcome it. If you want to share scientific knowledge or cultural exchanges, we are interested, but we demand nothing. Our protection is freely given." Zelthar was quiet for a long moment, watching his people begin to rebuild their world. Finally, he spoke. "The galaxy mocked you. We all dismissed humanity as primitive and weak. We were so terribly wrong." "You were not wrong about everything," Laura said. "We are still relatively new to galactic society. There is much we can learn from older civilizations like yours, but we are not weak and we never were. We simply chose to hide our strength until it was needed." "Why?" Zelthar asked. "Why not demand respect from the beginning?" "Because respect that is demanded is not real respect. It is just fear wearing a mask. We wanted civilizations to value us for who we are, not fear us for what we can do. When the time came that our strength was needed, we used it, but we never let it define us." As the sun set on Veloria Prime, human and Velorian ships flew patrol together in orbit above. In medical facilities across the planet, human doctors worked alongside their Velorian counterparts. In the command centers, human and Velorian officers coordinated security and reconstruction efforts. It was the beginning of something new. Not an empire built on conquest, not a hegemony imposed through force, but a genuine alliance between species who had learned to trust each other through shared adversity. And across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds where people lived in fear of stronger neighbors, old communication frequencies were being dusted off and prepared. Because now they knew the truth. When you called for help, when you sent that desperate message into the void hoping someone would hear, humanity answered. They always answered.